Hello ladies and gentlemen, Keaton here, and welcome to the very first episode of what we are calling, for now at least, the Drop Pod. That's right, it's short for Tengu Drop Podcast, which is what this is. So, you know, since this is the first episode, I should probably sort of give you guys a rundown of what exactly you can probably expect with this different video that will be replacing the original vlogs that we would do every month. Basically, the Drop Pod will be, hopefully, Joe and I talking once a month about video games, just what we've been playing, impressions, you know, maybe updates to first impressions that we did for games that, you know, we continue to play off the channel, or we might just talk about the latest happenings in the video game industry, you know, industry news. And that's a way for us to, you know, connect on a different scale that we usually don't get to do with every video that we do. You know, our videos are very self-contained to the game in particular, usually, you know, and other than the visceral cleanup videos that we do, we really don't just get to shoot the breeze about video games and, you know, things in general. So the Drop Pod is our first attempt to sort of deviate away from just the whole like let's play first impression videos that we usually do for the channel, and try something a little different, something a little new. And you might be wondering, hey, where's the other fella who should be on this first episode? Unfortunately, due to major scheduling issues that come with being about 11 hours apart, unfortunately Joe cannot join us today, so unfortunately it's just me. I know I promised Joe would be on this new adventure in last week's recap video, but unfortunately, again, you know, with an 11-hour difference, it's really difficult sometimes for us to really sit down and do something other than the multiplayer videos that we do on a weekly basis. It's just, you know, that's the way things are right now. You know, but hopefully that'll change maybe in the future when we can more focus on this as a full-time gig, maybe. I don't know. Nonetheless, that's not really what we're here to talk about. We're not here to talk about channel stuff. We're here to talk about video games. And you know what, the footage you should be seeing right now, because I didn't want to go with videos that I'm going to be talking about, you know, topics with corresponding videos, because we might run into some YouTube content ID issues, and I really just don't want to deal with the headache. So for now, at least, you will be seeing video game footage, much like the vlogs. What you should be watching right now is Evolve beta footage that I recorded back at the beta, what was it, a week or two ago? A weekend or two ago? Was it? Whatever. Anyway, it's Evolve footage, and I guess that's a great way to just jump on into what our first topic could be. I guess I'll talk a little bit about my first impressions with the Evolve beta, and I guess the whole kerfuffle about Evolve in general, which has been like the recent focus. First off, Evolve is... Okay. First off, I played Evolve on my own. Unfortunately, Joe, Tim, Kevin, pretty much everyone who I play games with was not in the Evolve beta, so I had to fly solo. And much like Turtle Rock's previous game or games, Left 4 Dead, it's one of those games where you really need to have friends, or I don't think you're gonna have as much fun. And it's especially true with Evolve. If you're going to go into it alone, you're probably not going to have as good of a time as you will with friends. And unfortunately, you know, that is the way of the game. So pretty much all my impressions were... Actually, every single impression that I got from this game was playing it as a solo player in a vast pool of people who are partying up and, you know, playing together. So I would say that after about 2.5 hours of just, you know, playing the game, trying to really grasp it, I have to say that I came away from it pretty underwhelmed. Not necessarily because it's a bad game. It's actually a pretty fun game. It seems fairly balanced from what I played. Then again, I don't necessarily know how much of my experience, I don't know, is shared with a lot of other people, I guess. I will say that one major thing, and I don't understand why they did it this way, but when you boot up the game for the first time, it gives you a nice rundown of at least how to play the monster, and it gives you the basic controls and somewhat of the mechanics, and then it jumps you out to the first hunter, which is the assault class. And then I noticed that, unless I read it wrong, the tutorials unlock only when you do well in the previous tutorial for a class. Or so, for example, in order to unlock the next class in the hunters, I would have to do really well on the assault tutorial. But the problem with the tutorials are they're not exactly good tutorials. They're pretty much glorified, like, you know, like when you go into the options menu and you look at the key bindings, how to play the game. It's pretty much a glorified version of that, because it tells you what the keys do, it tells you how to use them, but it doesn't give you any sort of insight into how you actually utilize the mechanics. So for example, when the game is trying to teach you how to be an assault class, it gets to the point where you're using the weapons. For example, the mines, they just say plant the mines and let the monster step on them. They don't really teach you a way to utilize the mines. So a lot of the time, what I would see in gameplay from other players is people just spamming mines. Even I did that at some point, you know, panic spam the mines. And then it gets other things in the assault tutorial teaching you about that lightning gun, where it somehow has an effect with the shield, but you need to use it under certain circumstances. Yeah, it's just really not a good tutorial. And it's even worse for the monster, because again, with the monster tutorial, they're teaching you how to use the monster via the button prompts, and that you can jump only X amount of times, and you can climb, and you can snake, but they don't necessarily go into the specifics of how to utilize these mechanics, and it's really difficult to understand them in gameplay because everything is so chaotic, at least at like the low level, like level 1 tier, because everyone is just trying to kill the monster as soon as possible, and a lot of the time the monster is trying to kill the hunters as soon as possible. So you get into this constant repetition of just seeing who can outdo the other in the quickest amount of time, which was pretty much every single experience I had with the game. And when it transitioning into actual gameplay now, the problem I have with the game is the way that matchmaking is done. Again, a lot of people were playing in parties, so they're playing with their friends and everything. And the thing with playing in a party is, if you're playing in a party, you can't play as a monster. So what that seems to have done in a lot of my experience with the game, again, being a solo player, is I was forced to be the monster about, I would say, 90-something% of the time. In all of my 2.5 hours of playing, I played a human about 3 times. 3 times in about 2.5 hours of random matchmaking. Not only that, but at level 1 and 2, I was getting matched up with people who are like level 3, 4, 6, 8, and at that point, I'm pretty much just getting my butt whipped in and out, and there's really nothing I can do. The tutorial didn't really teach you how to play smart. Like, after the beta was over, I sort of started reading around community message boards and whatnot to figure out, was I playing right? Was I playing wrong? And the major thing I took away from it is to play a monster, you have to really sneak around. But the game doesn't teach you how well or how sneaking can work to your advantage. It just tells you if you sneak, you're probably not going to be seen as much, and you might be able to sneak up on monsters and eat them quicker that way, instead of alerting monsters to you and then in turn alerting, you know, the hunters maybe, or one of the bird thingies. So what ends up happening is, when I'm playing the game, I'm not actually utilizing sneak the way I think I should, or the way that the game wants me to sneak. I'm utilizing it based on the reactions to the hunters, and anytime I've used sneak, it seemed to be a momentary break from the hunters, and then eventually the hunters were immediately back on my butt. So there comes a point where you're like, well, the sneaking just doesn't seem to be useful. And again, what I read is that sneaking is a lot more useful than it seems when you sneak, because the monster tends, at least the Goliath, I think is what most people are talking about, is the Goliath can really sort of blend in with the environment because it's gray, but you don't get that sense of, oh yeah, maybe that's a tactic, because a lot of the times, especially with me, when I'm playing against like level 8 people who have unlocked much more advanced things, I'm getting like rained down on rockets, and I don't know, that whole ordeal was just very discouraging, you know. The sense of progression and the sense of not knowing what to do and not knowing how to play well, and then seeing people figuring this out, but when you're playing it, you're like, wow, I didn't know that was a thing, you know. So it gets into this really poor this feeling of being really terrible and not knowing how to necessarily advance or get better, but you're still leveling up and you're still getting things, you're getting perks and everything, which is cool, but you don't know how to utilize any of it to better your ability unless you go onto message boards and read what other people are saying, which, by the way, people start arguing about tactics anyway, so it gets even more confusing. So basically, again, I think that if you're playing with a group of friends, it's probably going to be a lot more fun than trying to play it on your own. And I have to say that it's I understand why they're doing it this way. I really understand the ambition that Turtle Rock have for the future of Evolve, but moving on to the whole aspect of their whole like DLC and pre-order and collector editions, whatever the hell you want to call them these days, the crazy amount of DLC already being teased before the game's even out is just ridiculous. And again, I appreciate the aspiration to make a continuously evolving game. Forgive the pun. You know, they want to continue to bring in new enemy types, new types of classes, new variations. I understand that, but again, you gotta think, what I played of the 2 hours in Evolve does not feel like a $60 game. Even though there's a lot missing from the beta, the core gameplay is pretty much the same, and if the matchmaking is just as bad as it was in the beta, as just someone who might want to do a quick skirmish here or there, you know, just get maybe 1 or 2 games of Evolve in, it's not worth a $60 price tag, in my opinion. So yeah, I can see why people are people are up in arms about it. The people who are irrationally upset about it, as if like Turtle Rock are like removing content. I assume Turtle Rock are not Capcom, and until they give me reason to believe that, I'm probably never going to believe that. But I don't think they're removing content to sell it back to their customers at a later date. I do believe that they have the best intentions in mind, but at the same time, I think that the way they're going about getting people hyped for the future of the content is not probably the best way to be doing it. I think maybe they should wait until they make sure that people want to play Evolve beyond like the first couple of weeks, because I don't know, man, unless you got a really dedicated team of people who want to keep playing that game, I think it's gonna die out real quick. Pretty much just like Titanfall, man. Pretty much anything that is very inherent on multiplayer, as history has shown us, man, it's really hard to keep that going. You know, Titanfall exists as an example for hopefully Evolve will learn from and not necessarily follow in its footsteps, you know, because it's unfortunate that Titanfall pretty much fell the wayside a couple of weeks after it was released, you know. So anyway, that's about all I'm gonna say about Evolve. I think I pretty much spent half this podcast. I wanted to originally just go for 30 minutes to see how it would work out, but I just spent about 15 minutes sort of ranting about Evolve. I will say this though, it looks like they put a lot of work into it. It doesn't seem like everything is broken or anything in the beta. It seemed very solid, although matchmaking just takes so long to load. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but hopefully that is, you know, fixed up a bit in the final release. But nonetheless, I think Evolve is a solid product. I don't think it should be $60, especially considering, like, here's the thing, if Turtle Rock and 2K came out and they were like, okay, we have all this DLC planned, so that's why we're gonna make Evolve like $40 at release, you know, we're gonna price it a little a little cheaper so that we can entice you to hopefully enjoy the product enough to purchase more DLC. But, you know, I think that's probably trying too hard to be optimistic, and that's probably very naive of me to say. But that's just what I would do if I were in their position. I would definitely look at it as, okay, we really want to expand upon this product in the future, but we're already scaring people off by being too ambitious at the start, and that's probably maybe gonna hurt us in the long run. I don't know. I don't know what Evolve has in the future, but hopefully they do well, and I'm probably gonna look forward to getting it much cheaper down the line, probably with Joe and friends, and you know, we'll play it then. But until then, you know, hopefully people enjoy, you know, Evolve for what it is, and hopefully 2K and Turtle Rock don't end up really screwing up. I'll just leave it at that. Moving on to something maybe a bit more positive. Recently, you know, there was AGDQ, Awesome Games Done Quick. It's a charity event put together every year, actually twice a year. There's AGDQ and SGDQ. AGDQ tends to take place, I think, at the start of the year, and SGDQ tends to take place in the summer, which is why it's Summer Games Done Quick. Nonetheless, they're charity events put together by speedrunners and streamers who, you know, raise money by doing 24/7, constantly speedrunning game after game after game. Really amazing stuff. I think my favorite thing this year was the Tetris exhibition. Good lord, Tetris is probably my favorite game of all time. Like, Shadow of the Colossus is probably up there, but Tetris is a game that I can pick up anytime, and as long as it's not a terrible port, I will enjoy the hell out of it. I love me some Tetris, and seeing it played at the highest level, and not to mention these guys were commentating while they were playing ridiculous amounts of Tetris, or doing ridiculous things in Tetris. One of the guys drops blocks into a pattern of an arrow. That was awesome. There were multiple examples of just high-level Tetris, to the point where blocks were appearing at the bottom of the screen and they were able to maintain. And it even gets to the point where the blocks are just completely invisible and they're still playing. I highly recommend, if you guys check out anything from AGDQ, at least check out the Tetris exhibition, because that was my favorite thing. I just freaked out the entire time. It was great. It was fantastic. Oh, it's so good. I'm more of a fan of the glitch runs than anything. There's always, you know, the appeal of seeing someone play legitimately, or a more traditional speed run where they're just maximizing optimization to a crazy degree. But I always like seeing games broken, especially games that I've just struggled through. I just love seeing them. The Vice City run was amazing. It was so well optimized. It was pretty much down to the minute, or even the second sometimes, where every single move counted, and that was amazing. Dark Souls 2, seeing the completely glitched, broken run was amazing, where he does it was a parry. Yeah, it was a parry to a roll, and they roll off the enemy, and then they've completely broken the physics of the game. It's ridiculous. Again, these are just things you gotta look up. I can't really explain them in words, and you know, obviously I can't put the footage on because of content ID, but yeah, the Uncharted speedrun was awesome as well. You know, just so much, just skipping huge chunks of the game by just clipping into a wall and triggering something else in the space of the game, you know? I always enjoy those in especially 3D games, because in 3D games like Bethesda games, the Fallouts, the Morrowind, they're literally clipping themselves into a wall and hitting an invisible trigger in an invisible world most of the time, and that proceeds them to the next areas in the game, and that is just ridiculous amounts of just, I don't even know how you do that. You know, that is some dedication. That is just that is just a group of people so eager to just break everything. So good. And obviously, you know, I Want to Be the Boshi is probably still one of my more favorite speedruns to watch pretty much every year so far. Which is just, you know, I think he's on another level in terms of speedrun commentators. I would say that that is probably one of the more difficult things about watching AGDQ and SGDQ sometimes is not everyone can be a natural commentator. I'm pretty sure I prove that every time I do a video, but you know, usually I watch these the speedruns at AGDQ and SGDQ to learn, you know, more of the thought process and, you know, why they're doing what they're doing, or what is even going on. And sometimes there are speedrunners who are either not saying a thing and just doing it and maybe making a remark here or there, or B, are just not excited about commentating about the game that they're speedrunning. And I feel like at AGDQ and SGDQ in particular, that's the one time a year you have to be excited about what you're doing, and it's much more of a mainstream thing than streaming on your own channel, where people who are watching probably know exactly why you're doing what you're doing, you know. But that's just a minor gripe, and obviously everyone can't be a good commentator, so I can't necessarily hold it against them. But that is one aspect that it sometimes makes runs hard to watch, but that's just me. And I guess in terms of current events, getting back to more, I guess, news stuff, if you want to go down that road, Hotline Miami 2 banned in Australia, or refuses. It got refused for a rating in Australia, which I guess that means it's bad. Yeah, but that is unfortunate. That is really unfortunate. And instead of going the obvious route of, you know, talking about what's wrong with Australia, why can't you just, you know, let adults be adults, or allow adults to make their own decisions? I mean, you know, that old chestnut has been cracked open a ton of times. But I remember, because it's one specific scene, for those of you who do not know, so there is at least one specific scene that always comes up when it comes to like Hotline Miami 2 and like censorship and whatnot. I believe it's the opening scene to Hotline Miami 2, where, you know, you kill a whole bunch of people, and then the player character eventually, I believe, either begins to or insinuates that he's about to rape a woman, and before anything actually happens, there's a cut, and it's revealed that the moment is actually part of a movie. They're filming a movie, so none of this is actually real. And this was reported way back when the game was first being demoed, and then obviously springing back up again because of the whole Australia banning the game. And I gotta say, as someone who loved the first game and really dug what it was trying to say, I think they could have handled the message a little better. But I really appreciated what Hotline Miami tried to do, and I really enjoyed the game for what it was. I could play it as a more serious sort of like, this is an interesting way to approach the narrative, or I could play it like a arcade game where, oh man, I gotta bash these guys in the head as soon as possible because I gotta get a score multiplier enough to beat my high score. But I remember when they were first talking about this particular scene in Hotline Miami 2, while I can understand why people would be disturbed by the notion of what's going on, despite the fact that it turns out to be not real, I'm a little annoyed that people had no discretion for maybe people who didn't want to have it spoiled. I know that kind of sounds selfish, but I do wish to a certain extent that people weren't so offended by 8-bit graphics of a scene that is not actually what is being criticized for, or what's raising the flags. Because I would have loved to experience that scene for myself, because essentially what that scene does is it glorifies the violence and disturbing nature of Hotline Miami 1, and then takes it to an extremely uncomfortable situation before giving you a psych out and saying that's not actually happening, but it acts as a prelude to what actually happens in the game later. And I'm gonna stop sort of spoiling what I've already heard in terms of the narrative there. But again, that would have been a moment where I would have started the game up, I would have gone through that scene, I would have been like, okay, I was okay with, you know, bashing people on the head, but I don't know if I want to play a rapist, you know? maybe it's a double standard. Maybe it's one of those things where, oh, the people in the USA are okay with blowing people's heads off but see a boobie and they freak out. Oh, that's not really the thing I'm trying to say here. Is just I would question the nature of the character I'm playing and the game I'm playing if not only is this character into violence, but he's also about to then rape a woman. You know, that sends many red flags. But the turnabout there is that it's not actually happening. It's part of the narrative in terms of it's a movie. So I don't know. It's a really weird thing where I can understand, I guess, where people are coming from. It sends a really weird message, especially in nowadays with the whole monster of controversy going on in the gaming industry on certain topics. I can understand that it would raise a lot of flags and just curious frustration, and especially in Australia, where Australia, was it Target and Kmart? No, Target and somewhere else eventually pulled Grand Theft Auto 5 from store shelves due to a protest, or not a protest, a petition. Excuse me, wrong P word. The petition for it to be removed because it depicted violence against women, which was a ridiculous thing. It was that was really ridiculous. But nonetheless, I would say, as a player, as a gamer, as someone who can differentiate between right and wrong, fact and fiction, I am kind of disappointed that I've read so much about this opening scene, and when I play it, it's not going to affect me the same way that I think that the developers would have wanted that experience to be done, you know? So that's unfortunate. that is a real unfortunate situation, I think, for everyone involved. I guess I will say that, you know, on the cusp of that, Australia should allow its adults to decide what they do and do not want to play. I get the feeling that a lot of this happens because people still have the preconceived notion that video games are only for children, despite the fact that I think like the average demographic is like a teenager to early adult or middle-aged adult. I don't even remember. That could be a statistic I'm just pulling out of my butt. But nonetheless, you know, it is unfortunate that we still live in an age where, you know, people only think of video games as children's toys, you know, because I think that, you know, the industry has done a lot to deserve better. But that is a pretty negative way to sort of end the first episode of the Drop Pod. But I think we've talked about quite a vast different topics. Actually, not necessarily. I think I talked about only 3 things, but nonetheless, you know, that's how we're gonna have to do it, right in solo this week, or this month I should say. It's gonna be a monthly thing once again. The Drop Pod is still very much a work in progress. Obviously, we don't have fancy graphics or anything surrounding this whole ordeal yet, because, you know, it's still very much something we want to work on and hopefully improve on. Once again, this is more of a test run. It was supposed to be Joe and I, but, you know, unfortunately, things didn't work out. I didn't want to postpone it either. Like, I could have postponed it to February and just done a vlog for January, but we are in 2015 and we really want to start working on newer stuff. So postponing would just be denying us the opportunity to really get on new projects. So once again, this has been the Drop Pod. More than ever, we really need to know what you guys think of these new ideas and shows and things that we try. So Drop Pod is one of the first things that we are trying to do outside of just Let's Plays and First Impressions. We will be trying other things in the future, but this is the first one, so we would really love it if you guys would let us know what you guys think. Obviously, there's a little less to go on because it's me talking and everything, and I apologize for that. Maybe the subject matter that I talked about were a little too deep and dark and a little too serious. I apologize, but, you know, unfortunately, that's sort of the more standout things that are happening in the industry right now. Maybe next month we'll have better things. In fact, in terms of game releases, there's a lot of more happy-go-lucky, less depressing things to look forward to in the end of January and February and so forth. So, you know, it's not all bad. So, yeah. So anyway, thank you to everyone who has managed to make it through the video and listen to me rant on for about half an hour or so. Once again, hopefully next month the Joe will be able to join us, and we shall continue to hopefully improve this little venture that we're doing here. So yes, once again, please let us know what you guys think of it. We would really appreciate the feedback. So with that, thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys next month with another Drop Pod. Bye!